Isaac Thornwood stared out the smudged window of his herb shop, watching as the villagers whispered among themselves. Their glances lingered too long on his family's home across the square. He sighed, turning back to the drying herbs hanging from the rafters. Another day, another rumor, he muttered under his breath. They're just waiting for me to slip up. The bell above the door jangled, startling him. His younger sister, Hannah, rushed inside, her face pale and her hands clutching a crumpled letter. "Isaac," she exclaimed, her voice trembling. "The magistrate sent another notice. They're demanding repayment by the next full moon. If we don't pay," her voice broke, "they'll seize the house." Isaac's jaw clenched as he took the letter from her hands. The words were as sharp as daggers, cold, indifferent, and final. "I'll find a way, Hannah," he said firmly. "I won't let them take what's left of our family." Hannah looked up at him, tears brimming in her eyes. "But how? There's nothing left to sell. No one will lend us money, not after." She didn't finish, but Isaac didn't need her to. He knew what she meant. After the rumors. After the accusations. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "I'll figure it out. Trust me." But even as he spoke the words, doubt gnawed at him. That evening, as the rain pattered against the windows and the fire crackled in the hearth, a sudden gust of wind blew through the shop. The air grew heavy, almost suffocating, and the fire dimmed to a flicker. Isaac turned sharply as the door creaked open. A tall figure stepped inside, shrouded in darkness. His presence filled the room, commanding and dangerous. "Isaac Thornwood," the figure said, his deep voice echoing unnaturally. "I've come to make you an offer." Isaac's heart pounded as he took a step back. "Who are you?" The figure stepped into the light, revealing striking features. His sharp jawline and glowing crimson eyes marked him for what he was, demon-kind. "I am Elitus, Lord of the Demon Realm," the man said smoothly. "And you, Isaac, are exactly who I need." Isaac's breath caught in his throat. "You must be mistaken. I'm just a herbalist." Elitus smirked. "Don't play coy. I know what you are. A witch hiding in plain sight. A noble effort, but futile. Your magic calls to me like a flame in the dark." Isaac's hands curled into fists. "What do you want?" "To save you," Elitus replied, his voice almost mocking. "Your family teeters on the brink of ruin, debts, false accusations, enemies intent on seeing you destroyed. I can fix it all. But it comes at a price." Isaac's eyes narrowed. "What kind of price?" The demon stepped closer, his gaze piercing. "Your hand in marriage. For 1 year, you will live in my realm, bound to me by contract. In return, your family's debts will vanish, and their reputation will be restored." The room fell silent, the crackling fire the only sound. That night, Isaac paced the small shop, the demon lord's words echoing in his mind. "You can't seriously be considering this," Hannah exclaimed, watching him with wide, tear-filled eyes. Isaac stopped and faced her. "What choice do I have, Hannah? If I don't do this, they'll lose everything. At least this way, you and Mother will be safe." "But what about you?" she asked, her voice breaking. "What will he do to you?" Isaac's lips curved into a sad smile. "I'll endure it. For you, I'd face 1,000 demons." The next evening, a chill filled the shop as Elitus returned, his crimson eyes glowing in the dim light. "Have you made your decision, Isaac Thornwood?" he asked, his tone calm but expectant. Isaac lifted his chin, meeting the demon's gaze. "I'll do it. I'll marry you. But if you harm my family or go back on your word. Elatus smirked. I am a demon, not a liar. My word is binding, as is this contract. With a wave of his hand, a glowing parchment appeared between them, the intricate runes shimmering with magic. Place your hand on the seal, Elatus instructed. Isaac hesitated, his pulse racing. Then, with a deep breath, he pressed his palm to the parchment. Magic flared, enveloping his hand and binding the deal. Elatus's smirk softened, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Brave. This arrangement may prove interesting. The following day, Isaac stood in an opulent hall, surrounded by demons. Their gazes were sharp, their whispers biting. A human. How humiliating for our Lord. This one won't last long. Isaac ignored them, his focus on Elatus, who stood beside him, regal and unreadable. Take my hand, Elatus said, his voice cutting through the murmurs. Our bond must be sealed before them all. Isaac hesitated, his heart pounding. Then, he stepped forward and placed his hand in Elatus's. Elatus began to chant, his voice steady and commanding. By the ancient magic of my kind, I bind us together for 1 year. Let no force, mortal or immortal, break this vow. Light erupted in the room, and Isaac felt a surge of magic settle in his chest. When the light faded, Elatus leaned close, his voice low. Welcome to your new life, Isaac Thornwood. Isaac swallowed hard, his gaze fixed on the sea of demons before him. Whatever lay ahead, he knew one thing for certain, there was no turning back. Isaac's first steps into the demon realm were overwhelming. The air was thick with magic, heavy and electrifying, unlike anything he had ever felt. The sprawling landscape before him was both beautiful and terrifying, crimson skies streaked with gold, jagged mountains that shimmered with dark energy, and forests of towering black trees that seemed to breathe. Elatus walked ahead of him, his confident strides unbothered by Isaac's hesitance. Keep up, Isaac, Elatus said without turning around. We're not here to admire the scenery. Isaac quickened his pace, his gaze darting between the unfamiliar sights. This place, it doesn't feel real. Elatus smirked. You're not in the mortal realm anymore. Reality here is what I make it. Isaac frowned but said nothing. His chest still burned faintly from the binding magic, a constant reminder of the contract he had just signed. When they reached the castle, Isaac's breath caught in his throat. It towered over the horizon, its obsidian walls glinting like polished glass. Strange symbols pulsed along its surface, glowing faintly with a deep red light. As they entered, the grandeur of the castle struck Isaac even harder. The halls were impossibly vast, lined with massive chandeliers that glowed with floating orbs of light. Demonic servants moved silently through the corridors, their eyes downcast as they passed their lord. Is this all for show? Isaac asked, unable to hide the sarcasm in his voice. Elatus chuckled. Impressed, are we? No, Isaac shot back, crossing his arms. I just wonder how many people you had to exploit to build this monstrosity. Elatus stopped abruptly and turned to face him, his crimson eyes narrowing. Careful, Isaac. I don't tolerate disrespect in my domain. Isaac met his gaze, refusing to back down. And I don't tolerate being treated like a pawn. We both know this isn't a marriage, it's a transaction. Elatus's smirk returned, but it was colder this time. A brave tongue. Let's hope it doesn't get you into trouble. Isaac was shown to his quarters, a lavish room far too large for one person. The bed alone could have fit his entire family. He sat on the edge of it, feeling out of place amidst the silk and gold. A soft knock at the door startled him. A small, timid demon servant entered, carrying a tray of food. "Your dinner, Master Isaac," the servant murmured, avoiding eye contact. Isaac sighed. "Thank you, Azatec," the demon said quietly. "Thank you, Azatec," Isaac repeated. He took the tray and hesitated. "You don't have to call me Master, you know." Azatec looked up briefly, her glowing yellow eyes filled with surprise. "But, you're the Lord's consort. It's proper." Isaac frowned. "I don't feel like a consort. I feel like collateral." Azatec didn't respond, but the sympathy in his gaze spoke volumes. After he left, Isaac barely touched the food. His thoughts swirled with everything that had happened. He had saved his family, for now, but at what cost? Later that night, Isaac found himself wandering the castle halls. Despite its grandeur, the place felt cold and empty. He eventually found Elidis in a massive study, seated by a roaring fire. The demon lord looked up as Isaac entered, raising an eyebrow. "Couldn't sleep?" Elidis asked, his tone almost casual. Isaac folded his arms, leaning against the doorway. "Hard to sleep when I'm in a place that feels like it's trying to swallow me whole." Elidis smirked. "You'll get used to it." Isaac stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. "Why me? You could have chosen anyone, another demon, someone who actually wanted this." Elidis's expression darkened. He set down the book he had been reading and leaned back in his chair. "You think this was my first choice? I had my reasons, which? And none of them are your concern." Isaac bristled. "You don't even want me here, do you? This is just politics for you. A way to gain something else." Elidis's gaze locked onto Isaac's, sharp and unreadable. "Careful, Isaac. You're treading on dangerous ground." Isaac didn't flinch. "You keep saying that, but I'm not afraid of you, Elidis. I've already lost so much. What's one more risk?" For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, to Isaac's surprise, Elidis laughed, a low, bitter sound. "You're either very brave or very foolish," Elidis said, standing. "Either way, you'll need that fire if you're going to survive here." The next few days passed in a blur. Isaac kept to himself as much as possible, but the castle seemed to conspire against him. He would turn a corner and find himself face to face with Elidis, or pass a window and see the demon lord watching him from afar. One evening, as he wandered through the gardens, he stumbled upon a strange tree with glowing silver leaves. Its beauty was mesmerizing. He reached out to touch one of the leaves, but a voice stopped him. "Don't," Elidis said, appearing suddenly. Isaac pulled his hand back, startled. "Why not?" "That tree is bound to me," Elidis explained, his tone softer than usual. "Its magic is dangerous to anyone else." Isaac frowned. "Why would you keep something so dangerous here?" Elidis hesitated, then said, "It's a reminder of what I've lost." Isaac looked at him, surprised by the vulnerability in his voice. For a moment, he saw past the cold, powerful exterior to something deeper, something wounded. "Maybe you're not as heartless as you want everyone to think," Isaac said quietly. Elidis's gaze snapped to him, and the moment was gone. "Go inside, Isaac. It's not safe here at night." Isaac opened his mouth to argue but stopped when he saw the shadows shifting in the trees. Reluctantly, he obeyed. That night, as Isaac lay in his bed, he couldn't stop thinking about Elidis. The demon lord was an enigma. Cold and distant one moment, strangely protective the next. Isaac's life in the demon realm had become a strange rhythm, one where moments of stillness often gave way to bursts of chaos. He spent his days learning the rules of Elidus's domain, his nights lost in thought about the enigmatic demon who had bound their fates together. But as time passed, something changed between them, an unspoken tension that hung in the air. One evening, Isaac found himself once again wandering the castle grounds. He was still trying to understand the magic of the place, the way the walls seemed to pulse with life, the way the air tasted of something ancient and untamable. He had heard rumors of Elidus's cruelty, but every time they spoke, Isaac saw something different in the demon's eyes, a depth of emotion, something almost human. He wandered to the castle's highest tower, the one with a perfect view of the darkened sky. The stars here were like nothing he had ever seen, burning with an intensity that made the night feel alive. Lost in the view, Isaac didn't hear the soft footfalls behind him until a familiar voice broke the silence. Isaac. He turned, his heart skipping a beat when he saw Elidus standing in the doorway, his silhouette framed by the dim light of the hall behind him. "What are you doing here?" Isaac asked, his voice more strained than he intended. "I could ask you the same thing." Elidus stepped forward, his eyes fixed on Isaac with a strange intensity. "The view isn't as good as it seems, you know." Isaac arched an eyebrow, crossing his arms. "You sound almost concerned." "What, you think I'll jump off the balcony?" A flicker of something darker passed across Elidus's face, but it quickly faded into a smirk. "I don't think you do anything so rash." Isaac scoffed but didn't look away. "Why would you care? I'm just a means to an end for you. This whole marriage, it's just a contract." Elidus's gaze softened for a moment, his posture straightening. "I never said it was only a contract. But perhaps you need a reminder of the arrangement." "I don't mind reminding you." Isaac swallowed hard, a mix of frustration and confusion swirling in his chest. "What do you mean by that?" Elidus took a step closer, his presence like an overwhelming force. "You think this is just a transaction. But I have my own reasons for binding you to me. Not all of them are selfish, Isaac." Isaac's pulse quickened as the space between them closed. "Then what do you want from me?" His voice was barely above a whisper. Elidus's lips curved into something softer, more genuine than the usual smirk. "I want you to trust me." The tension in the air seemed to thicken, crackling like static. Isaac could feel the heat of Elidus's presence, the pulse of magic that hummed in the air whenever they were near each other. He had never been this close to the demon lord before, and it was unsettling in the most unexpected way. Elidus's eyes softened. "I don't know how," and Isaac for a moment, confessed, the demon voice seemed almost human, vulnerable in a way that made Isaac's heart ache. "I didn't expect you to," Elidus said quietly. "But maybe one day, you will." Isaac opened his mouth to respond, but his breath caught when Elidus reached out, brushing a lock of hair from his face. The gesture was so gentle that Isaac froze, his heart hammering in his chest. "Do you ever wonder, Isaac," Elidus whispered, his hand lingering near Isaac's cheek, "if this bond is more than just magic?" Isaac didn't know how to answer. Part of him wanted to push Elidus away, to maintain the distance he had built between them. But another part, the part that had been silently craving something more, found it hard to resist the pull of Elidus's gaze. I don't know what to think anymore," Isaac murmured, his voice barely audible. Elidus stepped even closer, until their breaths mingled, a mere whisper of air between them. "You don't have to have the answers, Isaac. Just let yourself feel, even if it's just for tonight." Without warning, Elidus leaned down, capturing Isaac's lips in a soft, tentative kiss. It was brief, but it felt like a spark, like the first light of dawn breaking through the dark. Isaac's heart raced as he pulled away, his mind reeling from the unexpected warmth. "I've been waiting for that," Elatus said quietly, his voice rough. "I just needed you to see me." Isaac didn't know how to respond, his thoughts tangled in the kiss, the feelings that had suddenly risen within him. I didn't expect this," he whispered, still reeling. "Neither did I," Elatus replied, his voice low and almost hesitant. "But I can't ignore what's between us." Isaac's breath caught in his throat. "Does this mean you care about me?" Elatus's gaze softened. "Care," he repeated, almost to himself. "I don't know what I feel, Isaac. But I know that you're more than just a pawn to me." Isaac's heart skipped a beat. "Then why did you choose me?" Elatus's eyes flickered with something unreadable. "Maybe because, despite all the magic, all the power I have, you're the one thing I can't control." Isaac stood still, his body humming with the tension of the moment. The kiss had changed everything, opened a door he wasn't sure he was ready to walk through. And yet, part of him longed to step through it. "Isaac," Elatus whispered, his voice almost a plea. "I may not have all the answers, but I know what I want. And I want you to be a part of that." Isaac met Elatus's gaze, his heart in turmoil. He didn't know where this would lead, but in that moment, a part of him was willing to find out. "I don't know if I can trust you," Isaac said softly. "But I'll try." Elatus's lips curved into a smile that was both tender and full of promise. "That's all I ask, Isaac. That's all I need." Days passed since that night in the tower, and the bond between Isaac and Elatus grew undeniable. The tension that had once weighed heavily between them began to shift, transforming into something warmer, something more intimate. Yet, despite the growing closeness, Isaac still wasn't sure of the path ahead. He spent his days learning more about the demon realm, its intricacies, its dangers. There were still whispers about him in the halls, but they no longer felt as suffocating. Isaac had learned to hold his head high, even when faced with the piercing stares of Elatus's subjects. But still, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. A test. A choice he would have to make. One evening, Elatus found Isaac once again in the gardens, his favorite place in the castle. The air was cooler now, the first hint of autumn brushing through the leaves. Isaac stood by the same tree where they had spoken days ago, his fingers lightly tracing the silver branches. "You've been distant lately," Elatus's voice cut through the silence, his tone both calm and knowing. Isaac turned slowly, his eyes meeting the demon's. "I've been thinking." "I can tell," Elatus said with a faint smile. He moved closer, his steps silent. "And what exactly have you been thinking about?" Isaac hesitated, unsure of how to voice the turmoil in his heart. "About us. About the bond. About the contract." Elatus's smile faded, replaced by something more serious. "You don't have to make a choice right now, Isaac. The contract still has time. I won't rush you." Isaac felt the weight of his words in his chest. He had already given so much of himself to this contract, to Elatus. But the truth was, he wasn't sure if he was ready to give his heart as well. "I don't know if I can love you," Isaac admitted quietly. "I'm not like you, Elatus. I don't have the power to just feel things like you do. You're different." Elatus stepped closer, his expression softening. "I've never asked you to be like me, Isaac. I only want you to be yourself. And in return, I'll give you what I can." Isaac closed his eyes, feeling the weight of his emotions pressing down on him. When he opened them again, he found Elatus's gaze softer than it had ever been, the sharpness in his eyes replaced with something that could almost be called tenderness. It was then that the true test came. As Isaac was walking through the castle one morning, a strange, uneasy energy filled the air. Elatus was waiting for him in the central courtyard, his usual confident stance replaced by a look of intense concentration. "There's something I need to show you, Isaac," Elatus said, his voice low. Isaac followed him, heart pounding. "What's going on?" The courtyard was empty except for a stone altar at the center. The ground around it was covered in runes that pulsed faintly with dark energy. Elatus stopped in front of it and turned to face Isaac. "This is the Heartstone," Elatus explained, his voice distant. "The source of power in my realm. It holds the magic that binds all of us together. It's also what ties you and me, our bond." Isaac's eyes narrowed. "What does this have to do with me?" Elatus stepped aside, revealing a small, glowing gem embedded in the altar. It pulsed rhythmically, like a heartbeat. "You're the one who can stabilize it. If you agree, if you truly give your heart, you will be able to control the Heartstone and solidify our bond. It will make our connection permanent." Isaac felt a chill run through him. "And if I don't? What happens?" Elatus's expression darkened, and for the first time, Isaac saw the weight of his power. "If you don't, the magic between us will fade, and the deal will end. Your family's debts will return. The protection will be gone. You will be free, but we will be severed." Isaac's mind raced. It was a choice he hadn't been prepared for, one that forced him to confront his own feelings. He wasn't sure if he was ready to give up everything. He wasn't sure if he could let go of his past and commit to Elatus. But as he stood there, watching Elatus, something inside him shifted. Maybe it was the tenderness in Elatus's gaze. Maybe it was the way he had never pressured Isaac, never forced him into anything. Isaac took a deep breath, his heart thudding painfully in his chest. He walked to the altar, his fingers hovering over the Heartstone. "Elatus," he said quietly, his voice shaking slightly. I don't know if I can do this. But I know I can't live with regret. I've spent too long questioning everything, holding on to what's comfortable. And maybe that's why I've been afraid." Elatus stepped closer, his presence a steadying force. "I'll be here, Isaac. No matter what you choose." Isaac turned to face him, meeting his gaze with newfound determination. "I choose you." With that, Isaac placed his hand on the Heartstone. Magic surged through him, electrifying and overwhelming, filling him with an intense warmth. The world around him seemed to vanish for a moment, leaving only the bond between them. When the magic subsided, Isaac looked up to find Elatus before him, his eyes wide with awe. "You did it." Isaac smiled, the weight of the decision lifted